So the Bank of England is saying there's a material risk to the financial stability of their essentially economic system. And when they use this kind of language, it can't be good. And I'm being really serious. It can't be good. There's nothing good to say here. Hey everyone, this is Chris, and welcome back to the channel. I'm going to try to do my best to explain the situation. And also, too, I'll let you know that this is tough because right now, no one wants to tell you the truth at all because it just looks really, really bad for England. And I'm just not making stuff up. This is the language of them. And you can see the headline is Bank of England widens government bond purchases as it warns of financial stability risk. We knew that there were problems before, right? And it seems that no one seems to be keeping their promises. It's sort of the way it goes. And I put this stuff together really quickly to try to help you guys understand it. And this is a developing situation, so please comment on these things if anything that I missed, because it is a complicated and convoluted system, and no one wants to tell you the truth. Okay, so first is you got to understand that energy prices are soaring in England. Okay, so the regular British person is like, crap. What are we going to do? 80% jump in energy costs. This is like real money out of your pocket every single day, right? The other thing too, you're facing is massive inflation in the UK. It went down to like 9.9. That was like the last read, but before that it was 10.1. In the USA we complain about inflation at 8, but they're even higher than us in the USA. Although I'm in Korea, but you guys get my point. Is this they're facing big inflation, and you're also dealing too with what is the aftermath of Brexit, which I think did a lot more damage than people want to talk about publicly in England. One of the things that is going on as well is the bond yields are also spiking, and this is throwing many of the calculations of the pension funds out of whack. The basic gist of it is that the pension funds are over leveraged, sometimes 6 times, 7 times over leveraged, means they borrow too much money, essentially. And the way that it works is they were counting on the bond market being stable, interest rates being stable, but because inflation is spiking and the Bank of England is trying to control inflation, essentially cutting the money supply. However, Bank of England has been talking about reversing the money supply, essentially what we're talking about here, and trying to keep solvency among pension funds. This is a complicated issue, and kind of what's spooking the markets in the UK is it's really the language of the Bank of England, and also too it's the budget of the government, which is essentially deficit spending, and they won't release the numbers. So I know I said a lot of things right away really quickly, but I want to start by saying the reason why this thing is so crazy is mostly because the language of the Bank of England, it doesn't give anyone assurance, myself included, because I'm reading, this is from their language, this is the Bank of England. Let me read it. And remember, generally speaking, they want to keep markets calm, right? They don't want to freak anyone out, but this is their language. Okay, the purpose of these operations is to enable LDI funds to address risks to the resilience from volatile and long-dated gilt market. Gilt markets are bond market. LDI is their it's their liability-driven investments. The basic gist is they're over-leveraged, liability-driven, right? And the LDI refers also to the activity that the pension funds are doing. So it's saying they're over leveraged. LDI funds have made substantial progress in doing so over the past week. Okay, here's the next part. However, the beginning of this week has seen a further significant repricing of government debt. Okay, so the issue is, and this is sort of why I mentioned all these things all together, is the government was like trying to help people by, hey, we'll just give you a bunch of money because we got to get you to pay your energy bills. Also to this notion of lowering taxes to try to stimulate the economy. You're increasing spending, you're lowering your taxes. The math doesn't add up. Okay, and when you say, this is the language of the Bank of England was saying, like, okay, there's a significant repricing of government debt. It means that things are volatile and things are significantly moving, right? Particularly index-linked gilts. I'll show you guys a drawing in a second here. I just want to go through the language of the Bank of England. Dysfunction in this market. This is the Bank of England. You don't want to hear this kind of language from your central bank. And the prospect of reinforcing, quote, fire sale dynamic poses material risk to the financial stability. And this is the part of the language that just doesn't sound good at all. Again, from the Bank of England, they're using their language. They're saying there's a fire sale. This basically refers to the bond market. And actually, it's bond, stocks, everything. Fire sale dynamics pose a material risk to UK financial stability. So the Bank of England is basically signaling to everyone that they are worried about solvency of the country. This is how I read this. And again, this is their language. And I'm trying to make sense to you guys. I put together this little chart here as best as I try to explain it. So let me issue some of the main points. So the first is in the UK. Again, their budget didn't really make sense. And people are like, "Hey, yo, government, please show us your numbers. We want to see that our government can do what they promised to do." But they're not releasing their budget and they're not releasing their numbers. And some people are joking that it's going to be the Halloween budget. And that's for real. This is how crazy UK is. And you thought USA was crazy. Their deficit spending, and I think there's worries about insolvency. What we need to understand here is, okay, why are we talking about insolvency? First, you got to understand what a basic bond is. What is, or guilt is the same word as same idea as bond for Americans, but the basic idea is when the government wants to do something, they got to fund it somehow, right? And so what the government can do is essentially borrow money from people. That's essentially what it is. The idea is that you lend your money to the government, and the government ultimately pay you back. Now the issue becomes if their budget doesn't make sense, like the government budget doesn't make sense. I think people are kind of concerned about insolvency. I mean, like, crap, could like England not pay us back? Now, generally speaking, is if a government can't pay you back, theoretically, or not theoretically, they could just print a bunch of money. And in fact, we just gave the Nobel Peace Prize to Ben Bernanke. That would be the U.S. Fed, and basically he got the Nobel Peace Prize, or not Peace Prize, sorry, Nobel Economic Prize for printing money during the bank financial crisis of 0809. So what happens though if everyone thinks that you're insolvent and then that you're just going to print money? What do you think happens to your currency if everyone thinks you're going to print money to pay your bills? I think you guys already know the answers. I'm kind of leading you on, but it crashes, right? You guys can see this because they're thinking, okay, government, you're making this budget that doesn't make any sense, right? You're cutting taxes, you're increasing spending. The only way for you to pay people back the money that that people essentially issued a bond. Remember, you're borrowing money from people and you're going to pay them back with more. Essentially, you're just going to print money to pay people. That's sort of how this game works. It doesn't make sense. That's the whole point. It doesn't make sense. And so then people don't trust that your currency is worth anything because you're just going to be printing money. That's why the pound is weakening. The other thing, too, is going on. Let me go back to my chart here. Is because people think, okay, your bonds or gilts, which is the same thing as UK, because we're kind of worried about the government actually paying us back. Everyone's just selling these things because, like, why would you want to have these things? Is sort of how I'm reading this, and there's a lot of panic. The other thing is too is as interest rates go up, if you are over leveraged, right, and in the situation of the pension funds in the UK. And the reason why the pension funds sort of do things the way they do is normally the gilt market / bond market is a little bit more stable, and they do all their math calculations based on stability. That's everything's based on stability. And when you're over leveraged to the hilt, kind of like think of it this way: when you buy a house, just for example, and you have an adjustable rate mortgage, and suddenly you have your budget and you have your calculations and you're kind of all set. And let's say interest rate spikes by like 5%, suddenly you just can't make your payments. In this situation, payments regarding the pension funds in the UK is sort of payments to retirement people, right? They have commitments that they got to make. So they manage a pool of money, and they got to make have commitments to people they want to make. The issue is that interest rates go up, it ruins their math completely, and then they're forced to sell at a loss in some situations. Many of their holdings to hold a bunch of cash. They have to have enough cash. To make, I know this guy doesn't make any sense. They have to have enough cash in order for their essentially their leverage to make sense. When you borrow money, whoever you're borrowing from, make sure you want to have cash that you can at least make your monthly payments on the stuff that you borrowed. It literally is kind of like spending too much on a house that you can't afford, and suddenly interest rates change and everything goes out of whack. And so I'm just laughing because this is like it's like not good. Okay, so then the Bank of England essentially they're fighting a couple different problems. So one is inflation's going through the roof, right? They're in charge of the money supply. They also say interest rates the same way our Fed does. If inflation is going through the roof, printing money is not really something you want to be doing. It's actually making things worse, and everyone knows you're making things worse, and the situation cascades to worse. So it's not good. But the problem becomes like the whole system is not functioning correctly. That's why they're saying dysfunction in the markets. The other issue is too as well is this was the language of the first time around, and I mentioned this to you guys, and this is sort of why and you guys haven't seen it already, please watch my video on the on basically the history of the U.S. market and the history of our essentially Fed and printing money and market crash, stuff like that. Please watch it. But the basic gist of it is here regarding the Bank of England is they're really concerned about the whole thing not working at all, because what happened was about I think it was like 2 weeks ago when we talked about this before, is that the mortgages, the banks weren't lending money for anyone for mortgages, so that was freezing up their housing market. No one is really feeling safe or secure in the UK, because their currency doesn't really make any sense anymore as it keeps going down. Like it doesn't feel strong, and the Bank of England is basically propping it up by buying gilts. But the issue is just that their government budget won't be released. So I know I said a bunch of things all at the same time. It is a crazy situation, and trust me, guys, I don't get it either. These people at the top, was this Quasi and then Trust, they don't make any sense to me. So if I'm not making any sense to you, it's because I'm trying to follow what these people are doing, because I'm reading again that they're making yet another U-turn on their budget. I don't know what they're doing. I really don't. And I want people from the UK to chime in and say, what are your people doing over there? Because the whole gist of this thing is like you want a government that's stable, but I also understand that you also want to make sure that your people can pay their bills, right? If and I think kind of this whole thing relates to, say, it relates to everything, but the war in Ukraine obviously ruptured the sort of supply chains of everything, be it your food, be it your energy, right? And you're facing spiking costs all over the world, right? So it's not just England, but all over the world. And the issue becomes, people retreat to safety when they're worried about the future of things, right? And it's kind of crazy, because I think the other thing is too is you have to think about the history of Europe, where they've seen war in Europe before. And so, yeah, for people in the USA, and you have never experienced wars like that, and if you guys know my personal history, my family was killed in the Vietnam War, so war is very real to me, like extremely real. But maybe Americans at home, that means nothing to them. And you have to think about too in Europe, like they have the historical memory, cultural memory of like war in Europe, like being really serious. And part of the issue is as well is like, do you have faith in your financial system, and do you have faith in your leaders that you're going to make it through? And I think kind of the combination of what's going on with the UK is just that you're dealing with, after Brexit, you're trying to separate yourself from the rest of Europe, thinking that if you drop off the countries that are a drain on your economy, and this is sort of the concept behind it, you'll be better off on your own. The argument I would make against that is the reason why you trade, and the reason why you want to have relations with other countries, is because every country is efficient at certain things, right? That's the concept. I'm just telling you guys, that's the concept. That's why you want a union with other people. The basic idea is like, one country is really good at A, one country is really good at B. You trade with each other, so you're both doing what you're good at. It's the basic gist. The other issue in UK is like they're having issues with there was a bunch of industries that lacked the labor that they needed, because you needed the flow of people coming in from Europe, but that essentially has been cut off. It's the same problem in the USA. I know I've gone through so much stuff. This whole England thing, it could be saved. It's not completely dire, but a lot of it rests on, does anyone trust that the leadership in the UK, that they can put forth a budget that makes sense, right? And this is also too, can they control inflation, and can the regular British person pay their debt? And on top of that, and debt being energy, debt being food, debt being their credit, whatever they owe and stuff like that. Their housing market's crashing as well, those kind of debts, and interest rates are spiking. And one of the things too in England, which is different than the USA, and many countries are like this, to where people get essentially variable rate mortgages. So it kind of throws the whole system out of whack when rates spike this much, and everything's really uncertain. The other thing too, which is an issue as well, when your currency crashes, like what it does in England, right? The pound sterling crashing, it makes it really expensive for you to buy stuff from other countries. That's why we mentioned the EU thing before, because it's a complicated system. Okay, if you rely on bringing in goods from another country, like let's say, for example, you have to buy fish from France or whatever, right? And your whole business is buying fish from France to keep operation, and suddenly having pounds is worthless compared to trying to buy stuff from France because they're trading in the EU or whatever, or you're trying to buy stuff from USA, like you're trying to buy microchips, and the dollar's like really strong, and so suddenly microchips from Nvidia become really expensive, and you need those chips to continue your business. Like it throws everything out of whack, and the government can okay, we'll help you pay your energy, help you pay your bills so you can keep your business running, and so we'll just give you money. We'll just like basically print money or something like that, and that and expounds inflation. And then you get this situation where like your pension funds are over leveraged. And all their math calculations are out the window because interest rates are rising, which is really crazy. Um, Nothing makes sense right now. The Bank of England wanted to be doing opposite of what they're doing now, opposed to propping up the system. They would prefer to be sucking money out of the system, which is similar to what the Fed wants to do in the USA. And everyone seems to be, how about this? The best way to think about it is everyone in the UK seems to be mismanaging their budget, over leveraged, and just not enough money coming in. And I don't like to see this kind of language again. This is from the central bank. Where is it here? I had it right here. The central bank in England. The key lines that kind of people spooked is they're saying their their dysfunction in this market and the prospect of self-reinforcing fire sale, meaning that when things go really cheap, you got to sell it, and then like because everyone's selling at the same time, you're kind of panicking, and if you're over leveraged, you're basically margin called. You're kind of screwed. Everyone's screwed because everyone's doing a fire sale. You're selling everything. It's everything must go kind of stuff, and they're worried about, this is their language again, material risk to UK financial stability. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the UK. We're talking about financial stability, and the basic gist is they're not stable. That's what it looks like to me. And put this on top of whatever the heck's going on with Credit Suisse. I have no idea right now, because they said they're going to tell us at the end of the month. I guess UK and Credit Suisse are all telling us at the end of the month. You still have the issue with what's going on with China, with their whole real estate crash. And you also have the essentially unstable markets in the USA. So everyone's connected. None of this sounds good. And it was also yesterday, too, when JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, the CEO, basically came out and said, everyone, I think recession is real, and the market could go down 20% from here. So, so the rest of the world is not making the UK feel any better. But at the moment, it looks like the UK is the first domino, and they're being propped up by their own bank by, it looks like, essentially printing money. So, love to hear you guys' thoughts on this thing, and anyone from the UK. If I missed anything, please let me know. I did my best to try to throw everything together and explain it to you guys. It is a funky system. I don't think anything makes sense right now. And that's why I've been warning you guys about this stuff for a long time. And just to understand that, this is sort of why people retreat to safety and why the dollar's going up, because like you don't trust anyone else. You're like, you know what? I mean, even the U.S. government's kind of, whack, but at least I know my dollar's good because everyone's going to go get the dollar. So that's what's going on. So anyway, love to hear your thoughts on this one. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next video.